Welcome to the Brothers and Sisters Podcast. This is what's coming up next, so stay tuned.
The issue was a problem of legislation. They basically took heroin and rebranded it, or some type of opium and rebranded it, and then even lobby for it and even encourage doctors. I don't know. They're not gonna suffer the consequences they should for, but they're like the biggest dope dealers in the history of man. You know what I mean? It's like,
good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Brothers and Sisters Podcast. Today is Thursday, July 29th, 2021. Per usual, Sean, Autumn, and I are in Baltimore. Walter is in Delaware. Kim, where are you coming from? Chicago?
Chicago, and I recently relocated down to Central Illinois, so I'm in Bloomington.
Okay, got it. I knew there was a Chicago connection, but now Bloomington, Illinois. We've got Nicole will be joining us shortly, hopefully. We've got a jam-packed show that I'd like to be concise and complete. Walter doesn't think it's going to happen. It's going to be the same freewheeling conversation we always have, but we'll see what we can do. Tonight we'll be discussing, in order, 50 years. This is the 50-year anniversary of the drug war. We're all Black. We know it's touched us in some way, if not personally, then certainly through family and friends. So we'll be able to get kind of sort of a introspective, retrospective view of that. The actual economic numbers came out today. The economy is actually back to the size it was pre-pandemic, but a lot of that growth has been boosted. And it's funny, you would say you moved to Central Illinois, Ken. A lot of the job growth has been in the suburbs, outside of major cities. Major cities are really lacking in the job recovery. And of course, we know who lives in major cities, Black and brown people. So it's affecting our labor force in a major way. We got Simone Biles exercising her mental and physical autonomy by dropping out of the Olympics, triggering many people, them overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male. And we're going to have kind of sort of a bonanza at the end, which now I think about it, Walter might be right. That might last longer than 15 minutes. I don't even know what to call it. The congruence of Lil Nas X's release Industry Baby, which unlike Old Town Road is a good song. And the video that accompanied it, along with the response by T.I. and Lil Baby, not Lil Baby, Da Baby, and Tory Lanez, and the kind of sort of an examination of homophobia and sexism in hip hop as is. And then of course we'll have our feature interview with our guest, Kimberly Veal. Kim, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm from Chicago. I host a podcast called Black Free Thinkers. I also have an organization called People of Color Beyond Faith. And for the past 3 years, I kind of had to put everything to the side because we had some upheaval in the family. But I'm bringing everything back, plus a new campaign that I'm going to be out there, basically showing where the Democrats are falling short. But I am here to have an excellent conversation, and I'm really looking forward to this today. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Please, the pleasure is all ours. The pleasure is all ours. So if everybody is ready to start, let's begin. In July 1971, Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs. We are now 50 years past it, and the United States is the biggest consumer of drugs in the world by far. Oh. I think what I saw, we're something like, we're like 20% of the world's population, and we consume almost 70% of the drugs. It's countless lives have been destroyed, either via the drug trade itself, or probably even more devastating to us as Black people, the criminal justice system and the havoc that it's unleashed in our community via prisons and disparities in sentencing. And we're in an age right now where we're seeing a move towards, certainly a move towards marijuana legalization, and actually a move towards other drugs also, although in a much less visible, much less sustained campaign. As I said in the intro, we've all been kind of affected by the war on drugs. I personally have been, not necessarily through the criminal justice system, but through family members, particularly my dad, who was in and out of jail, who suffered from a drug addiction, which ultimately led to his death shortly after I graduated from high school. When we think about the war on drugs, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I don't know if there's a first thing that comes to mind. I think it's a fallacy. You can't, it kind of doesn't work, right? You can't have a war on something that's a mental problem.
Yeah.
The majority of the opioid problems that we have today have been because of depression today. And I think even during the heroin and the crack epidemic of the 80s and the 70s, the same thing, right? The opioids were being used by soldiers who were coming back from Vietnam who didn't know how to deal with or didn't have the counseling to deal with what they saw during the war. And being a direct influence over the other males in the neighborhood, that made a difference. And when someone taught Black communities how to make money off of drug use, it blew up and it got out of control and they lost control of it. So they purported this fake war on drugs when it was really just a war on putting Black men and getting Black men to become felons so they couldn't vote. I mean, that at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on, right? Like, we know Ehrlichman had told us a couple years ago, right? Where he was like, yeah, we started the war on drugs. It was aimed at hippies and Black people. That's literally what they said. And now here we are, half a century later, and what do we have?
Just that, precisely.
Right? What do we have? What do we think about the focus on the opioid epidemic today? Is that a result of the war on drugs? Is it encompassed in it? Because it seems to be painted more as a pharmaceutical, almost company, almost an industrial kind of a problem, and not necessarily a product of legislation.
So, go ahead, Sean.
No, the issue was a problem of legislation. They basically took heroin and rebranded it, or some type of opium and rebranded it, and then even lobby for it and even encourage doctors. I mean, they're not gonna suffer the consequences they should for, but they're like the biggest dope dealers in the history of man. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think the effect on the white population because of the way it was packaged and the way it was put out, it's like a whole new narrative on it, which is real disconcerting, considering what Black and brown communities have gone through as a result of the same the drug war policies anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of sort of what Walter, he pretty much pinpointed it as it's a disease. It's a mental, it's a health problem, but it wasn't treated that way, at least not during when, not to date ourselves, but we're in everybody's 40s, late 30s, early 40s and up. We know it wasn't treated that way. Definitely not in the 80s. Definitely.
Right.
It was, we all know that it's well documented that our own government brought the drugs into the country.
Yeah.
And taught
exactly
people how to distribute the drugs in the community, how to sell it and how to set up the business in the community. And when Big Pharma figured out what the game was, that's when it became a problem, right? Because people didn't have to go in and worry about going into the hood to go buy their drugs. They go to their pharmacist. I mean, my wife is a clinical pharmacist as part of her responsibility. And in Florida, they literally have things called, quote, pain management centers, unquote, where people go clinic to clinic and get opiates.
Yeah.
The biggest example of that is Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah. Yep. a fiend for
Didn't,
the oxygen.
didn't a lot of
Show
yeah,
clause.
they just settled what a $350 million lawsuit or something like that recently. Johnson Johnson.
Yeah.
So I feel that it's the most unfair thing in the world to tell a grown person what they can't do with their body, right?
Mhm.
It's a fabricated war. It's a systemically and systematically control poor people who haven't been given the coping mechanism to deal with whatever mental anguish that they're dealing with, right? And so their only outlet is the one that they control, and they control that they can go to the corner and spend their $10, $20, $30 and buy their drugs and get high and forget about all their problems,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Now people are have gotten arrested and their lives ruined because they chose to ingest, swallow, smoke, snort, shoot up whatever drug that they chose to. Why not? My biggest thing is just like with health, you know, it starts at 5 years old when the kids go to school, right? It's the education. If the kids are given better choices on sugar, the probability of them using drugs decreases by X factor as they become adults because they're not creating that addiction to something, you know, at a young age. So
that's where I was gonna go next. We kind of we're in the generation of, and we're dating ourselves, and we always do. I don't really care.
Right.
Some people be like, what the hell are you talking about? Of McGruff the crime dog, right? And officer friendly.
Yeah.
and like, you know, just say no, right?
yeah.
Or they this is your brain on drugs, the egg.
Yeah.
Why do you guys think that kind of messaging, why do you think that strategy failed? Do we think it failed? I mean, I could be speaking out of turn. I think it failed, but
it failed. No, it's not realistic. You know what I'm saying?
We remembered it, so it couldn't have failed, right? If you remember it, it didn't
that's
fail.
what I'm saying.
You remember it as in a joking manner, you know what I mean? She was a joke to everybody. That's what I feel like it was.
I mean, it worked. It stuck.
I think it worked to some extent because I was one of the nerds who I wasn't going to do drugs anyway, but then seeing that just confirmed it. Like, I'm not getting in trouble. I don't want to do drugs. Well, most kids aren't like me. Most people aren't like me. That's just my personality. So, but I know there are probably some people that it wasn't a total failure, but not a great success.
Yeah, I mean, the fear tactics don't work. It's a public health problem, and no matter how many eggs you fry on TV, word of mouth is going to get around. Like, this shit feels good, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not going to be like, word of mouth is the greatest advertising for drugs, you know what I mean?
Especially a certain
Right.
age, your friends who are having fun, or this random commercial on TV with an egg frying, like, kids are gonna listen to whoever they're around, and they're people.
And they weren't even specific about the drug that would fry your brain. It was just like all drugs.
All drugs, right?
What was the other one? It was like, where did you learn how to do this? Where did you get this?
Right.
I learned from you, Dad.
That was like Sean said, it's like in a joking manner. We remember
Right. Right. But see, the thing is that with the opioids, the reason why they're trying to be more nurturing and understanding is because it's impacting white communities.
Bingo.
And again, the war on drugs was basically a war on Black and brown people, and they just finally admitted that most recently. But if we're going to tie it in, you know, with Richard Nixon, we must address Ronald Reagan and what happened when he got in office. And then we have to tie that to Iran-Contra with the weapons and the drugs and the CIA's involvement. And you tie that in with what's happening today. You know, when we had the crack epidemic, those people were not given any type of sensitivity. Now that we have opioids, they're trying to be sensitive. They're trying to use some tax money for rehabilitation centers and all of that, you know, so it's all about the hue of your skin. Personally, I think all drugs should be legalized. What you do with your body is your business.
Yeah.
I agree to infinitesimal point only because it affects my healthcare. And
far as what premiums, you're having to cover more people.
if you go to an ER because you OD, you're stopping someone who had a heart attack. You're stopping someone who got in a car wreck because you're taking up that bed.
But okay, classic man. Like if somebody
I mean, it's
who trains the best, like that's the same thing. That's the same thing
Like-
happened with people who like, have breakfast cheesesteaks and washing them down with like malt shakes every day, right?
I don't disagree with that. But your health insurance rate,
All of those
Like when it was
directly related to how healthy you are. Period.
when it was an issue only affecting Black and brown communities, it served its purpose because it made its own gravy, especially politically, not just for Nixon,
Right.
Bush, Reagan, even the Clintons. You know what I mean? They forced that that super predator narrative, but it kind of loses steam because you can even turn it into a moral issue, like like look at these people, and this is why this is this way. But when it starts affecting white people, it kind of turns it on its head, and people see it for what it is. And it's crazy how the whole new narrative on it, man. It's so it's so loving and caring. Before it was just like it was like draconian how they dealt with Black and brown communities.
Sure.
Right. And Kimberly, another one of our sisters, Nicole Epps, has just joined us back from the fundraising dinner. So you should get Nicole. Kimberly Beal is our guest tonight.
Yes, hi Kimberly. Sorry that I'm late. Greetings from Minneapolis.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
What up?
Hey,
Hey,
Nicole, how are
I
you?
need to review with you later on, Nicole.
I know I owe you a phone call.
We're in the midst of a discussion of the 50th anniversary of the drug war. And the point we just left off of was the difference in the opioid epidemic and how Kim made the point, Sean kind of sort of reinforced it, how it's different now because white people are being affected, and how draconian the treatment was when we were growing up compared to how it is now. I also think what's interesting in all of this is we were talking about the disparity in treatment, the difference in sentencing, and I wrote about this, between cocaine and crack and how that was targeted towards Black people. And now, as white people began to smoke more crack, they decided, well, maybe we doesn't need to have this disparity anymore. And then you guys were tracing, Kim, you started, which was good, and Sean continued it. You guys were tracing the kind of sort of development over the presidential administrations. So I remember Bill Clinton was the first president who kind of sort of, he's like, what he says, like, I didn't inhale, right?
Right.
Right.
It kind of sort of dissipated from there, right? Bush was like, yeah, I was a fiend for the white, right? He had to admit that, right?
He was also a dealer.
Yeah, of course he
Exactly.
was. And then Obama was like, I was smoking weed at Punahou and in college. And that's like kind of sort of where it became even a lesser kind of an issue for those who are in charge of law enforcement, right? That's what the president does, right? He's the lead law enforcement guy in the nation. So I think that even tracing that path kind of sort of shows the failure, or at least the lack of effectiveness of the quote unquote war on drugs.
Right, and we can't forget about the impact or the basically the complicity of the federal government within this. Because if you go back and you look at Gary Webb, he's the one that exposed the CIA. And there's a movie on Netflix called Don't Kill the Messenger, or no, it's Kill the Messenger. And it's really good, and I would suggest that you all watch that. But in that movie, it talks about when the Clintons took office, how the Attorney General Deutsch had to come out and talk about that story that Gary Webb had published, and how Maxine Waters and all of those politicians kind of milked that. But it got so bad that Attorney General Deutsch had to go to LA and had a town hall. And then 1 month later, he quit. And later on down the line, they commissioned a report. And when the report was released, it was released during the time of Monica Lewinsky. So a lot of people didn't, get a chance to read that report. And if
Gary Webb died under the unexpected circumstances, right?
Yeah, two bullets to the head, but it was a
Looked like
suicide,
a hit.
right?
Yeah, it looked like a hit.
Oh
They
yeah,
called it suicide.
exactly. Oh yeah, but think about this. When we talk about what's been happening in this country, what happened in 2007 and 2008 with the mortgage bust bubble, right?
Mhm.
The only reason why this country did not go toes up is because of money laundering and
Yeah,
drug sales. That
yeah.
is what saved our asses.
It's something like 3% of our GDP, our entire GDP, and it's trillions of dollars. Our GDP is our gross domestic product. That's all the goods and services that the United States produces. Like 3% of it is quote unquote unaccounted for. It's black market stuff.
Right.
Like, so you're talking a legitimate sum of money that's towards illicit activity, money laundering, drugs, like
Prostitution.
billions of dollars, right?
Look,
Yeah. So it gets counted. You can't, the dollars spend the same, right? So they definitely get counted in the report.
Right. That's why I'm like, legalize it. Then we can tax it and create programs to deal with the issues. If these people are trying to cover up pain, we need to look at what created that pain, what created that violence. Why did they do that?
Yeah.
Living in America.
Right.
Well, I think it's also funny, like just the dispensaries and in general, and what the starting entry points are. And then even in New Jersey, they're trying to give we'll give 10 certificates to more urban areas. But all of a sudden now, there's a difference between, now weed is okay. Before it was like lowbrow, but now it's a dispensary. So we all have medical marijuana cards now. So
Yeah. It's the acceptance, the wide scale, the wholesale acceptance of marijuana within our lifetimes has just been fascinating. Again,
it's also fascinating, like as a social worker, to talk about, I'm sorry, just to revert to the opioid crisis and how it's now substance abuse disorder, and it's a disorder.
yeah.
But if you look at the NASW for 10 to 15 or even years before, substance abuse was just a mental failing, and it was only within mental challenges during the DSM.
Yeah.
And so, it really just shows the difference in, and I would say this even as a social worker, it's predominantly white. So now it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Before it was just a bunch of, black and brown people who lacked the mental fortitude to not be on drugs. So it's funny how that happens.
And money is the ultimate driver of all of this, right? Really, right? We've identified race, but really money also. When Colorado legalized and people were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then they had their first state report. It's like, we're actually generating tens of billions of dollars from this. And other states are like, hey, we might need this. Personally, I abhor drugs and alcohol. I stay away from the stuff. But I am going to a bachelor party in Lisbon, in Portugal. And the riffraff that I hang out with, we chose that because of the drug culture. Now, again, I was against that culture, but I was voted out, so I had to go anyway. And
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Yeah, I try. Like I say, in Portugal, to I think Kim's point, and Walter talked about it too. Drugs are legal, and it's more or less. They're like hospitals, right? They're like clinics. It's like, oh, you need help. Like, here's a place where you can detox.
Well, they have harm reduction centers.
Yeah, that bingo. I knew there was a social worker on here who could help me with that. Yeah. So like that, and the results, lower crime and higher revenues in Portugal, because Portugal is struggling, to your point, Kim, in the world recession. Portugal, like many other the smaller EU countries, were struggling post 2008. So not only that launched a spiral of drug abuse, right? So not only did they not have money because of the economics, people were turning to drugs. And so they were like, why don't we just legalize them all and treat it as a health thing? And it's been remarkably successful.
But how can you incarcerate, 4 million people.
Yeah.
If you take away the primary reason, you put them in jail.
Yeah. Incarceration is an industry, a money-making, job-creating industry.
Can I also just be like a super social worker for a second here? And I know you guys are going to kick me off through the screen, but I mean, I also feel like when we talk about substance abuse, we're actually talking about unprocessed trauma.
Exactly.
So to me, it's not about like the drug use as much as it is how many broken bodies we have that haven't been able to do these things. And I mean, and I'm sure you're aware of like the rat studies that show when there's a supportive environment, they are not, driven to take opioids. I keep moving this thing because it looks like my forehead is like massive with this light. So that's why I keep like doing this. I'm sorry. I'm a little vain right now. But I also think like, so if we're going to talk about substance abuse, misuse, however you want to define it now, we actually need to talk about how much we're failing and how we're failing in different communities, and why now is it a problem because Connor and Kelly and Rebecca are using it, but like what are we not doing for Connor, Kelly, and Rebecca that we weren't doing for like Jay Sean and Lakeithia, whatever. I'm making up very ridiculous names. But on top of all of that, I also think that we also need to have like a biological discussion of adolescence and how much adolescence has changed since we were growing up, and the plasticity of like the prefrontal cortex and the plasticity of the brain, and how adolescence in the world that we're changing, that transition to adulthood is not the same. So I would even make the argument that in addition to talking about substance misuse, we need to talk about the fact that the traditional markers of adulthood are no longer the same. So all of this sort of risk-taking behavior without worrying about consequences and very poor impulse regulation is just a manifestation of the fact that adolescence is lasting until 25, 26, 27.
Well, when you get this thing in mom and dad's health insurance until you're 26.
Exactly.
Have no responsibilities until you're 27. And you can't get a job because you got your undergraduate degree in basket weaving. That's what happened.
And if you can't get it, like, but all those markings are gone, right?
You can't find a job. You make
that's funny.
$35,000 a year working in Wally World.
But you're happy and you feel fulfilled.
Are you happy now? Obviously, you ain't happy because you sorting, smoking, and popping every pill you can find.
So I also find it funny with like this new generation where it's all like, I literally had like one of my interns tell me today that she wasn't able to do something because she didn't feel fulfilled. Like she didn't feel like really engaged. And it like took everything in me to be like, do you think I'm engaged having this conversation with you right now?
Those are actually
you think your feelings are important? Like what?
Those are things that
we're going to discuss, right? We're going to
101-2A. That number 2, why I can't work for somebody else.
Yeah, we're going to get to both of those things, right? Kind of sort of the preparation for the job market that people have or don't have, but particularly post-pandemic, which of course the pandemic has changed the game.
Sure.
And then also with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, how young people are like, if I'm not into it, I'm not gonna fucking do it. Is it healthy or is it not? We don't know. So we'll definitely get to those for sure. Well, I know Walter's happy because I was like, oh, it's gonna be 15 minutes. We're coming up on a half hour on this topic. Let's just breeze by.
I should have bet the over and under.
I should have bet the over, right? Right? Do we want to have any closing remarks? Or you know what? Let me ask you guys a question. Where do we go from here in this quote unquote war on drugs?
100% legal, just like guns. Either everyone can have them or no one can have them. Drugs, either everyone can use them or no one can use them. Period. Full stop. But if you're gonna do it, you have to set up a system in place for people who are addicted or have issues where the tax revenue generated is setting up recovery centers and places that people can go to when they OD or when they have an issue or have a problem or they want to get off the shit that they're on. They need to be part of the program.
And maybe keep fentanyl on the schedule one. I don't know if there's a need for that one.
I mean, I'm for legalization with harm reduction, as long as that also includes like diminished court sentences and freeing people who've been in jail. So I don't care what you legalize, unless you make sure that people like they're getting reparations for their lives.
Yeah, I'm just saying, prohibit that one as much as you can.
Although, Sean, I don't know if I'm comfortable with you branding us an anti-fentanyl podcast.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm just saying, my personal, it's just like, all you need is a little ass bit and you die. Like,
but isn't that the same with like bath salts, Sean? Like, I mean, you could find everything.
Right?
Meth, you can die from meth. I mean,
I'm saying let's just not like, okay, legalize it, but still be on the lookout for it. Let's not have a corner fentanyl shop and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want an open air fentanyl market?
No.
I'm not touching this because I'm gonna lose my job. I'm done.
But see, look, this is the thing here. You know, again, I feel like they should all be legalized. They should be taxed. One good example is Evanston, Illinois. With the revenues that they're getting from marijuana, they are paying reparations to Black and Brown communities. And again, they should have the rehabilitation centers, programs that address different, you know, the violence that we deal with on a daily basis. But we have to be careful, because some of these well-to-do drug dealers, I'm talking about the ones at the top, will also be the ones owning the drug rehab center.
Yes.
So it's a win-win for them. So we have to be careful, but it needs to happen.
And I also would argue that we should be focused on harm reduction. And I don't mean that because I don't have faith in the process of recovery, but there are just some people who will always use. Yeah. So we just need to minimize HIV, minimize STIs and things like that. But we can't pretend that and Kimberly, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, in addition to, like, rehab is not going to work for everyone. And it doesn't even work for people 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
That's right.
You don't have to replace it with, then
like, I'd rather just have safe, like, you know, needle drop off sites and things like that. And just, you know, it's like that in, you know, Germany and in Spain. Like, you just know that, and Switzerland, actually, they're just areas, and you just know, like, I can get clean needles here. It's not about judgment, it's about being safe.
Sean, you beat us all to Amsterdam. We were all thinking it. Like, that's what happened. I think we had some good ideas, good discussion. For you fentanyl users out there, we aren't against you. We aren't trying to limit your autonomy.
No, I'm just saying.
We're not in it.
I'm out of that one.
Right in video.
Oh no, listen.
Be careful with that shit is all I'm saying.
Yeah, we are. I mean,
yeah, like maybe if you're just starting out and experimenting, you don't want to go straight to fentanyl. Maybe you should.
But do you go straight to fentanyl, or is the fentanyl like a surprise you get?
That's probably why.
Right,
both.
Like, so people are actively, I thought fentanyl was like, oh my God, I thought it was heroin.
No, I think they cut it too. They cut it with shit and make it more potent, but it's like, it's dangerous, especially people don't know what they're doing.
Like waves of people. I don't know if you remember, this was actually Nicole and Sean and Autumn. Do you all remember in Brooklyn in like,
yes, when they were all dying?
Yeah, there's just like a wave of death, and people are like, what is this? That's the first time I heard fentanyl, and it was like,
that was bath salts. That was fentanyl.
Bath salts were bad too.
Oh, those salts.
Bath salts give you like the Florida stories and shit. Fentanyl.
Where they start biting people, right, and thinking they're zombies.
Yeah, that's what Flatbush zombies.
Outside of my realm of expertise.
I don't know much about fentanyl. I can barely pronounce it right. I'm like, it's a fentanyl, but if it's extremely dangerous and just a tiny bit of it could kill a person, then maybe there should be some regulation over that if everything else is legalized.
But can I say something crazy, Autumn?
Mm-hmm.
And I know this, like, this is where I get fired.
No, we're gonna edit.
No. But this is the moment. 10 years
mixed conversation.
Okay? But the struggle that I just have with, like, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine. You ever hear real good stories about that? Anybody ever have a really good heroin experience?
No,
Ever
I
really
haven't
work
heard.
out?
I
So
haven't
at a
heard
certain
of
point, there's a
anyone.
part of me that's like, how'd you think it
What
was
about
gonna
that
end?
dope
When I
thing,
start getting into meth, are you guys gonna be like, hey Nicole, I'm shocked your teeth fell out? Or like, hey, maybe Nicole, you shouldn't have gotten into meth.
Meth
Just asking.
is-
I'm thinking of
Yeah.
instances like
That's what
that.
I'm saying. They're always outliers. What about that Columbia
Professor.
professor who was been doing heroin
That
for years?
guy,
He uses
that
heroin.
guy was he was
Okay,
loved
but like, but are we doing a celebration as history of like meth and heroin? Like, oh, this guy is wonderful. Like,
No, I'm saying he's an outlier.
So
he is an outlier, but I guess the struggle that I have, and I've had the struggle for many years, is I can recognize it's a disease, but when it's compared to me with like cancer or other things, I really have a challenge because I feel, and you know, I have an ex-father-in-law who struggled with addiction, like where I'm like, at a certain point, did you or did you not know that you were making a choice where the options were pretty clear?
Right.
I mean, I kind of feel like at this point in life, I have a 12-year-old. I'm like, what do you think happens when you do heroin? Like, are like,
Things don't get better.
they
Yeah.
don't. They really don't.
Are
alcohol
not
is
going
the same
up.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alcohol is the same thing.
The same.
Well,
Exactly.
Heroin makes you think things are better. Makes you feel.
Yeah,
Most people on heroin are sick the first time they do it.
people are chasing that feeling.
Yeah, just
feeling
that
better.
first time, if you can
It's
just
the
recreate that,
after effects.
just trying to get
But
that.
where are the, you know, maybe I'm like a deep inside I'm a German, like, but where are the consequences for the choices you make? Like, I feel like Black and brown communities, we were told to suck it up. Like, it's something wrong with us. We don't know how to take care of our families. We're destroyed. But now, because like Timmy is doing heroin, now we're all supposed to be crying and clutching our pearls because Timmy wants to go down to Newark and get heroin. Like, oh, fucking well.
I'm
Yeah.
with
Good luck.
Walter and Tim. I'm not crying. I'm not crying for Timmy at all.
Yeah.
Legalize it all. It's almost like a
Gentlemen.
Darwin. It's almost like Darwinism, right? If people are going to go hard on heroin, fentanyl, cocaine,
They're gonna wake up dead. It ain't hard.
sugar,
So then
right?
you find
Sugar,
out.
like fats, cholesterol, like it's almost like a culling of the herd, right?
Wake up dead.
Yeah, it's the issue is that the people who are making the laws see their humanity and they don't see ours, and that's why it's getting like
Pathologizing.
featured on intervention with sad music in the background. Where if it's us, nobody cares. Just like step over the, drug addict on the street. They should know better. Go get a job.
I mean, see the difference in New Jersey about going in and seeing substance abuse disorder in Newark and then go down to like Mendham or Summit and how it's treated. And the police are just so kind and like, can I help you find things? In Newark, it's like, I'm going to throw you in the back and good luck to you. I hope you don't get best of luck.
Yeah. I think that goes, I mean, everything is all completely bundled together, right? It goes into how do we police the people who are users, right? Are they condemned to a cycle of a lifestyle that sucks? Because if you're a felon, it ain't too many jobs that people are gonna hire you now. It just sucks.
Yeah.
It is not a crime, and it shouldn't.
And what are you gonna do? Exactly, it shouldn't be.
Which is why, when it comes to certain laws, with drugs, there's a difference between what you're possessing as far as like
Gonna
amount.
go there,
Certain
and whether
amounts
you're under the influence.
yeah, certain amounts, it's like, okay, you just possess it. You're not necessarily going to get as much time as if you have more, because then it's like there's clearly an intent to distribute it. So you could have like a ton of drugs and you're planning to use it all for yourself and not distribute it, and you will be sentenced more harshly than a person who was probably trying to sell just a little bit, but it seems like they're using it just for
I was
on your lawyer.
stockpiling all this dope just in case.
It don't go bad.
But I have a disease and a good
does.
lawyer, so
It actually
maybe not.
does go bad.
and it's always easy to paint a
Again, I don't know.
I don't know. I
when
know.
the judge, can look at a person and see themselves in that person, then they're willing to be
It makes a
more-
difference. For sure.
Well, I mean, I think about like being a CASA,
like sentencing reform.
like family intensive, like court, especially for like removals of children. The judge makes the decision of how this family is going to be. And I have seen diversion and alternative programs for white parents who are literally shooting up in front of their kids. Their kids are walking around needles, and the judges will say like, oh, we need to give them a chance, like this is a disease. And then we see like Black parents and brown parents, and maybe they smoked weed, or maybe they were also on heroin, but they were hiding their needles, right? And they don't get that diversion program. They just get their kids removed. And so I think we also need to talk about like judges making decisions about removals from homes, because now that we've shortened the time period of children in care, like we continue to destroy Black and brown families. But white families are given 15 and 16 opportunities to be in intensive outpatient, inpatient rehab. And then it's like 1 or 2 strikes for a Black parent. And it can be the same exact case.
Yeah, because they're seen as an family that should get redemption, whereas us, they just don't.
We're just horrible.
That racism it's in the water.
It's everything. Racism is at the core of all of this stuff. And it's like there's no way to remove it.
Right.
Because the people who are making these decisions,
right,
even if they're not racist or don't believe they're racist, they're still making decisions based off of who they connect with the most.
Mm-hmm. It's so much a default position that people who are clearly racist don't even have an inkling that, you know what I'm saying? It's like
picture, right?
Did you see that that rapper Yellow Bean, Yellow something or whatever?
Well, do you a rapper knower?
Yeah, but like he did a thing and it was called like I'm Not Racist.
Oh no,
and it was really interesting. I'll find it. I found it randomly, but it was like a white Trump supporter talking about like all the things that make him not racist. This is what's happening. And then like the black man, he like responds to him. I mean, it felt like super powerful like 3 nights ago, but I had also been out to dinner, so I don't know
if it's that powerful. Have to like make song or take time to point out all the ways you're not racist. You know you're racist. Like,
well, that was the point of it. It's Joyner. See, look, this is what it tells you.
Joyner
I told you it was yellow. I told you it was Yellow Bean.
Yeah,
it was Joyner.
He's got a couple. He did the Will Smith song. He has a couple of tracks I like.
Yeah.
So we got racism. We got a couple of solutions. We're a solutions-oriented podcast. So I'm glad we got a couple of those. We certainly aren't pro and we're neutral on fentanyl. Just be careful. And I'm sure this is a topic that we're going to revisit, or at least if not specifically, but tangentially, really with our next segment, right? As we go towards jobs in the Black and brown community post-pandemic. So we'll revisit this, I'm sure.